Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and video show which brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, and experience from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe so you won't miss a new episode. I'm your host, Frits Bussemaker, and today I'm delighted and privileged to have a conversation with Moriba Jah. Moriba, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Moriba, I'm going to briefly introduce you to our audience. You call yourself a space environmentalist, PhD in University of Colorado. You're currently an associate professor in aerospace engineering. Have a background in we're working with NASA. Start actually with awarded the NASA Space Grant Student. You worked on the Mars program. You've been awarded the NASA Space Act Award along with numerous other awards. So we're going to talk about space today and specifically space environment. Again, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And first question, when I look at your website and see the mission, when you look at your academic outstance, mission is assessing, quantifying, and predicting the behavior of objects in space, both man-made and natural. Why is that a mission for you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for a couple of reasons. If we just look at space exploration in general, we as a humanity, we as a humanity need to venture out off the planet and be able to look at the possibility of settling in different parts, not just of the solar system, but the universe, because eventually our sun runs out of heat. Mm-hmm. And, spaceship Earth as we know it will have an end for sure. I mean, everything does. But if we really want to extend the expiration date of humanity, then, exploring space is something that we need to do. And certainly, there are only so many resources on the planet. The ability for us to take advantage and utilize resources elsewhere makes a lot of sense. And so, understanding the behavior of objects in space, natural or anthropogenic, is of interest because we need to get to places and we need to get to places safely. And unless we coordinate and understand how to do that, then it jeopardizes space exploration. But I would even say that the second reason, which is more, hitting home kind of thing, is that by and large, these robots in the sky that we call satellites provide us with services and capabilities that are very unique. And more of our technology infrastructure is space-based. Everything from, GPS with position navigation and timing to financial transactions to weather and climate change monitoring, and even, wars in Ukraine, that sort of stuff. Satellites provide us with unique data, and these satellites are not protected from being harmed by junk. And to quantify the junk, I mean, we're tracking about 50,000 objects, human-made objects, ranging in size from a cell phone to the space station, and about 5,000 of those work and everything else is trash. So like 90% of what we track in space is garbage.
Okay, so a clear reason why that mission is a very relevant mission. Now, I want to backtrack a little bit. How did you start your career in space? Was it always something you wanted to do when you grow up, or how did it happen?
Yeah, so even though I was born in 71 and the Apollo program was still happening, I don't have many memories of that. My first real memories of space are associated with the space shuttle program, Challenger and that sort of stuff. Unfortunately, that was it was horrible. I remember being in high school when Challenger happened and that sort of thing. So I always, I guess, was mesmerized with space and astronauts and these sorts of things. Very dreamy thing that I had. But it wasn't until after high school, I was in a military school in Venezuela, when I graduated from there, I came back to the United States, and I enlisted in the Air Force. And my job was to be a security guard guarding nuclear missiles in Montana. And it was the first time in my life that I had been in a place with such dark skies. Because growing up in Caracas, Venezuela, most people live in big cities and they don't know what a dark sky looks like. But when I was exposed to a dark sky, I realized how unalone we are. Like when I looked at the night sky, I'm like, it's jam-packed with stars and planets and all this other stuff. And I just never realized how populated the universe was. And I could see dots of light going across the sky. And these dots of light, turns out they were satellites reflecting sunlight. And that was mesmerizing to me. So that was the first time that I said, hey, I'm really curious about this and I'd like to know more. And so that's why I got out of the military and ended up studying aerospace engineering and focusing on astrodynamics.
Great. And studying astrodynamics, do you have the urge to go into space yourself, by the way, or is it just observing it from?
Look, man, a lot of people have this whole desire to go in space. This idea of going to like the space station and just be orbiting the Earth, I have zero interest in that. Because things are in orbit because there's a lot of gravity. Like some people say, oh, zero gravity. That's not true. Things are in orbit because of gravity. Just to give a quick explainer, it's like if I have a tennis ball, and let's say the tennis ball is the space station, and I have a string, and my fist is the Earth, and I spin it around, that motion of the tennis ball is basically the space station, and the thing that keeps it going around is the string. String is gravity. What happens if there's no gravity? Take the scissors to the string, ball keeps on going, right? So the reason things are in orbit is actually because of gravity. But everything is falling towards the Earth at the same rate. And I don't know about you, man, but when I picture myself jumping off of a plane and never hitting the ground and always falling, that experience of always falling, it doesn't sound like fun to me. So that's not my thing. Yeah.
Okay. No, I got that. Although I did a lot of mountain climbing in my time, and parapunting. So I understand a little bit that people do want to go up, but that's not the topic for today. Now, when we met in Geneva, we also briefly talked about the need for accountability in space.
Yeah.
That brings me also, I'm looking at the website of the company you founded, Prioritise, which you've found with Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak and Alex Fielding. You're the scientist there. And one of the things which really hit me when I look at that page is there are 27,000 human-made objects in space currently, although more because you said we track about 50,000 plus pieces of garbage in space.
Right.
But also, we're going to put up over 24,000 satellites in space in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
First of all, should we do this, given all the junk which is already there?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So I think that satellites provide great use for humanity. I think we need satellites, so we shouldn't stop launching or having them. However, I don't think that everybody needs to launch one. And so it's like if I was living in some places in Europe, I can tell you that I wouldn't even have a car because I would just use the public transportation. It would make sense. And if I needed to have a car, I would just hire a car, rent one, and go someplace, right? But here in the United States, for instance, especially living in a place like Austin, Texas, where I'm at, public transportation isn't that great. So it's like everybody has a car. And what is the outcome of everybody having a car? Traffic jams, stress, accidents, that sort of thing. So space is kind of similar. I don't think everybody needs to have their own satellite. And in fact, one of the things that we're trying to do with Privateer, we have something called Pono, and we're launching that at the end of this year. Just like we have rideshare on the roads with Uber, right? Several of us can get on a common car and get someplace. We want to demonstrate the capability to oversubscribe a satellite so that, hey, if you're somebody that just wants to take an image of some place on the planet, or you want to get some data, you don't have to launch a fleet of satellites to do it. You can just pay or subscribe for a service to get that, right? And so how do we minimize the number of single-use satellites in space? That is something that I very much care about, and that Privateer cares about as well. And one of the things that we're absolutely, working on is that sort of a concept. And in terms of like the sustainability of space long term, yeah, I mean, with all the junk that's up there, things collide with each other and become smaller pieces and these sorts of things, and that's definitely part of the problem. But the accountability is, there are international laws in space, and these are really encased in treaties and conventions that the United Nations has from like 1967 to 1972, the Outer Space Treaty, Convention on Liability and Damage, Space Object Registration, that sort of stuff. The interesting thing is that liability for any damage is on the shoulders of launching states, and launching states are defined in the treaty as the state that launches an object into space, the state that procures the launch of an object into space, or the state from whose territory or facility an object is launched. And so, for example, if a company like Planet Labs in California, if one of their Dove satellites gets launched with India's PSLV, launch vehicle, that means that both the United States and India are jointly liable for any damage that one satellite could cause through its lifetime, including re-entry and maybe even hitting something on the surface. But there is no place right now to look up what are the launching states associated with any given object, which means there's no real way to establish liability in space. And that's something else that I'm very much trying to work on, is establishing that.
Okay, that also, that rings a bell to gain transparency. Who's putting those satellites up there?
Exactly. And so, space situational awareness is the knowledge that we need in order to make decisions, and we want to make decisions that lead to desirable outcomes. And space situational awareness needs to do three things. It needs to provide transparency. What's up there? Who does it belong to? What can it do? It needs to provide predictability. Where are things at now, and where will they be at some point in the future? And it needs to provide a body of evidence to hold people accountable for their behaviors, which is what we're talking about right now. So I'm working on all three of those things.
Okay. Are you optimistic?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Absolutely, man. It's like, people have mentioned this whole Kessler syndrome kind of thing. And, for the viewers, basically, Don Kessler, who was a NASA scientist, came up with this theory that at some point, even if we don't launch any more things, things will be colliding and becoming smaller pieces. And then there's this kind of runaway train cascading effect, and then space becomes unusable. I don't believe in the Kessler syndrome. And the reason I don't is because in my science and engineering career so far, Mother Nature always shows herself to be very resilient if we give her the chance. Yeah, go ahead.
The Gaia principle, basically.
Yeah, it's like if we take the foot off the gas pedal, Mother Nature always tries to achieve a state of equilibrium. So I think that's one of the reasons I'm really optimistic, is because nature is so resilient.
Okay.
We shouldn't just rely on that resilience. We should give nature a chance to be resilient by not being so quick in making decisions that lead to unintended consequences that we can't live with.
Okay, I was just thinking of another consequence, which was recently in the news. I'm just referring to news about Starlink, which is causing problems with astronomers.
Yeah.
So it's a single purpose entity, as far as I understand. It's just providing connections on a global level, which I mean, I can.
There's benefit to that.
There's a benefit for that, but at the same time, it's causing problems for another community
Sure.
because it's hurting their ability to look into space. So would the international body you're talking about also be an entity which would then make a decision? Hey, don't put up as much Starlinks satellites as you thought you're going to do because it's jeopardizing other people's work.
Yeah, so I think that those communities need to be taken into account. And look, it's not just astronomers. I would say, astronomers of the world, forgive me, but I'm going to put even more importance on indigenous communities. Indigenous communities have a relationship with the sky that's very sacred to them. That means a lot to them. And in fact, the skies are moving more and more. Nobody's asking any indigenous populations, how do you feel or what do you think about the sky moving so much and that sort of stuff? And it's it's detrimental culturally to these people. And so I think that we need to be inclusive when we make decisions about what to put in space, not just do things because they're legal, but do things because we want to be in harmony and in balance with humanity and with life in general. But I will say that SpaceX in particular, they've been working with the astronomy community for several years and have redesigned their satellites to make them less reflective. So they're participating in this idea of trying to minimize the impact to the dark and quiet skies. But for sure, it's not zero, right? So there is going to be an impact because of satellites.
Hey, and I'll also briefly come back on the market debate about indigenous people, because for me it's quite interesting. You again made a reference to the role of indigenous people. I was interviewing Jimmy Nelson, who's a photographer who took photographs on indigenous people before they pass away, which is an incredible journey of people who still in this century take care of the planet. Tom Wheeler set up Tree Resistance, realizing indigenous people are 3% of the planet, but they protect 80% of the environment.
Yeah. So that's exactly so. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, man. These indigenous people are the original stewards of Spaceship Earth, and the thing is that first I was an astrodynamicist, and then I became a space environmentalist, and I became a space environmentalist in part because I saw the disparity, looking at land, air, and ocean, and how we've explored those things, looking at how pockets of indigenous people with they have principles that they live by. One, they tend to believe that all things are interconnected.
Yeah.
So when you believe in interconnectedness, your behavior is different. Two, they embrace this intergenerational contract of stewardship versus ownership of stuff, right? Ownership asks us to claim rights to things. Stewardship asks us to claim responsibility over stuff. They realize, hey, we humans are impermanent kind of stuff, but we need to have a successful conversation with the environment or else we don't make it. Indigenous people have had to find balance or else they don't make it. If they fish too much, if they do too much of this, that, or the other, nature tells them, now you're hosed. You won't make it. You won't survive because you've done, this irreparable damage. So they try to tread lightly and with caution when they approach trying to live in balance with life and that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, those are the OGs, the original stewards of Spaceship Earth. And as you said, they're the minimal percentage of the population, but they're the ones that take care of things the most. And we should be looking to them for inspiration and their ways of life to apply that in harmony with Western science. So traditional ecological knowledge or ancient tech is their thing. We have TECH, high tech and deep tech. These things need to be married with each other. Machines need to be used to help us to scale solutions to these global problems. And I think harmonizing ancient tech with high tech and deep tech is the path forward for sure.
I love it. I qualify myself as a pathological connector. I've been in community building for the last 20 years, and this resonates with me. Now, I want to ask you a couple of questions at the end about, you could say, what drives you as a person. Now, you said, okay, the very first time I really saw the sky was in Montana. So the inspiration for your current journey is the sky you saw in Montana. But to date, where do you draw your inspiration from? Is that still in space, or is that in people you meet or people you are aware of?
Yeah, so the whole reason, the interesting thing about the sky is that for me, the sky is a mirror of humanity. When I look to the sky, it's to know more about me, about us. And at the end of the day, I'm human. I'm part of this human population. I feel that I've been through a lot of traumatic experiences in my life. When I was born in the United States, my mom from Haiti, my father from Sierra Leone, but they got divorced when I was like 2 years old, and my father had visitation rights, and at the age of 7, he kidnapped me. And after 9 days of being kidnapped, the authorities found me and put me on a plane back to my mom, and my mom and I fled the country to Caracas with a cousin so that my father would never find me again. And there's like all these traumatic experiences that I've been through, and the thing that I guess I want to put out there is that even in my teenage years, being in this military boarding school, at some point at 16, I lost the desire to live. I felt very suicidal, and in this place of rock bottomness, the interesting thing that I found, which was unexpected, is I felt at the night sky in my military school, is I felt connected to the universe and to the source of all existence. And I felt an ocean of endless compassion and love, which was surprising to me. And I had two choices. I could either succumb to my experiences and just react and be somebody that just, acts in anger and all this other stuff, just like many other people, or I could try to make my pain be of service to other people. And that's what I chose. So my inspiration is to the source of all existence, to this interconnectedness. My source of inspiration are these indigenous practices. And I want my pain to be of service to others. That's my inspiration.
Wow. A question related to that is also how do you define success in the work you do? When are you satisfied?
I can tell you this, right? Part of me is already satisfied because I see evidence that things that I'm doing are resonating with people. Several months ago, somebody gave me their business card, and their title on their business card was Space Environmentalist. I thought that was awesome because I'd never seen that before, right? It's the whole space environmentalist thing is some term that I came up with just a few years ago. People are already using that on their business cards. There are conversations that I have with people in the US government and other governments, and I see some of my words show up in official policy and things like that. And every once in a while, I get people that email me and they said, hey, I had no idea about space, and now I'm a space environmentalist, and I'm giving talks and I'm talking to people and this, that, and the other. And so to me, success means if something happens to me where, my life this time around, Moriba Jah ceases to exist, there's enough momentum globally where other people are picking up and doing this sort of work. So to me, success is more of humanity resonating with interconnectedness, embracing stewardship, and recruiting empathy. Those are the three things that I like to see as evidence of success.
Okay, final question, Moriba. Maybe you've already answered this one, but is that also how you want the world to remember you as a space environmentalist?
I think in part I'd like the world to remember me as a space environmentalist, but I think more than anything, I want the world to remember me as a servant. That's how I want the world to remember me. This guy was a servant to humanity. He was a servant to Spaceship Earth. That's how I'd like to be remembered. And if possible, I'd like my children to think that I wasn't a horrible father, and that because it's really tough to juggle the family. I have 3 kids, and I'm pretty much I'm separated, divorce kind of thing. I have a 21-year-old, an 18-year-old, and a 6-year-old who's like behind me. And my mission of talking to people around the globe certainly has come at a cost to time that I've spent with my own family. So it's been really challenging, man. And but yeah, overall, I just want to be remembered as a servant.
Well, thank you for serving us and taking us on a journey through space. And I'm very confident that a number of people watching this will realize we need space environmentalists. And hopefully you've been able to motivate a couple of people to join the race. And thank you so much.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.